Let's go ahead and do some computations with dictionaries that have lists stored as their values. Okay, so let's say I've got a class of students here and we're measuring pi. Okay, and students are given a few different circular objects when they're going to measure the actual circumference divided by the diameter. I'm going to store each of their measurements in a dictionary. Okay, so there I have an empty dictionary. And the first student, let's say Eliza. Okay, I put the colon now to give the values. Now the value could be anything. It could be a list. It could be any Python data type, really. And so, let's say that the first measurement is 2.9, then 3.4, and then 3.1. Okay, so there's my first entry in the dictionary. So put a comma in and now do the next one. So say I've got Eric here. Now Eric measures 3 circles and Eric gets 2.8, 3.2, and 3.0. It's rounding 1 decimal place here. And finally we have Elena. And Elena gets 3.1, 3.3, and 3.5. Okay, so there we have several measurements where students are doing real measurements and, getting hopefully close to 3.14. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is save the dictionary. Shift return to save the dictionary. And what we want to do now is something like the following. We want to say compute the mean of the measurements, right? Like as a class, how close do we get to pi? So we got to get inside of the dictionaries. We've got to add up the elements in there and divide by the total number. And so I'm not going to do this with like fancy shortcuts. I'm just going to do this using like kind of raw Python code. So how do we get inside of the dictionary first, right? Like we've got the numbers. Well, those are the values. Okay, so if we try, we've got the pi measurements, okay? And these are the dot values, right? And so if I just press Shift Enter just to look at the values here, you can see I've got the numbers in the lists, right? Okay, so that's kind of interesting. And then I think a question naturally arises, can we get inside of there? Well, recall before we use the for loop, so for value. Now, it's not really a value, right? It's actually a list, okay? I think that can be helpful to be clear here. So for the lists that are, right, these are the lists, just to show you, right? Let's just print the lists. I mean, you see them right there, but right, these are actually lists. So we're not inside the value yet. But now, right, we've set this up as lists. And so we can go inside again, okay? Right, because we have 3 lists. And so now I can say something like, for the number in the lists, right? Okay, so I've got these 3 lists, and I want to get the number inside of the list. And what do I want to do with it? Well, I want to add it to something, okay? And generally speaking, we could start, we have a total of 0. And basically, we're going to update the total by adding these individual numbers. And so we're reassigning total when we keep adding the number. And so let's check this part of it. Let's see, does this do what's expected? When we're all said and done, okay, we want to print out the total. Okay, so let's see what we get for the total. And we get 28.3, which appears to be correct. Why do I say that appears to be correct? Well, we've got 9 total numbers. And if you divide by 9, you're getting 3 something. So just to clarify, right? Like the list we showed, it showed those 3 individual lists, right? But now it does these one at a time, okay? And basically for each individual list, it's a for loop inside of a for loop. What we do then is we sum the first 3. So in effect, the first time we see Eliza's numbers at the top, okay? That's our first list. And so what we're going to do then is add those 3 numbers. Okay, that exhausts that first list. And so then you go back up here, you get to the second list, and you go through that one and add to the total until you get to the final one. Now, we know that there are 9 elements here, But, you know, what if we didn't know how long they were? How could we actually determine, you know, and imagine that some students had more measurements than others. You know, how could we figure out the actual, the number to divide by? Let's see if we can do it with actual code. So when we're inside of these lists, like the lists have a certain length, right? Okay. And so what's the length of the list? And so we get it really by doing length of lists, right? I mean, we've got list plural here, but it's going to like loop through them one at a time. Okay. You know, if you do list singular, it's a keyword in Python, and I don't want to do that. Okay. So we want to sort of add the length of the list, right? And only one time. You have to put it in the right place. Well, what are we adding it to? Well, it's actually going to be flipped. So we've got a total value, and then we have like the, I don't know, it's like the number measured or something. I'm trying to think of a clean name for it. It's like number measured, I guess. It starts with 0. And, you know, another way you could do it, just to show you, I mean, you can do it via the length of the list, is you could just add up the count here, right? That's sort of a cleaner way to do it. So you can get the length of the list, right? But because we're counting individually, you know, here's the count to 0. Now you could do it like this. Like, let's verify that the two different ways would give us the same result. And so how do I change the count? Well, I add the length of the list, right? So that's one way to do it. And then instead of printing the total, I'll print the total divided by the count, because that's how you get the mean of something. So press Shift Enter to do that. Sorry, I mean, pi is 3.14. I honestly didn't, I should have laughed. I didn't know what I would get. Okay, I can tell you I did not plan this in advance. I was just trying to do things that were roughly close to pi. Pleasantly surprised. Okay, so that's one way you can do the count. Now, if you want to keep code in, but try something different, you can comment it out. And certainly now if we do it by individual, we can also do the count just plus equals 1, because each time we add one of the numbers, we add to the count. And so this should give us the same result. Okay, great. And notice that it really depends which loop that you're in, because if these were in the wrong loops, they would give you totally different answers. You know, just to show you, if I comment this one out, and I actually just tried counting them all here, let's see what we get. Something that doesn't, it's not right, because it only counted the 3 lists. And so I'm just highlighting this to say, like, if you're going to count something, you've got to make sure that you're in the right place. Okay, so let's get back to the accurate total count. 0 division error. Yeah, because we have the count back in there. You can't divide by 0. So try that one last time, and we have the 3.14 value restored. So that's one way you can sort of get inside and do lists inside of Python. And just to show you like one other thing, you know, you can turn values into a list in a dictionary. Like this has that for you already. But if you look at something, if you just, oh, sorry, I want to go down here. If you put list in, okay, you know, this will convert something into a list. And can we convert a dictionary into a list? Well, let's find out. We have a dictionary called pi measurements. Let's see what happens. You can see what's interesting is it converts just the keys into the list. And so if you wanted to convert the values into a list, then you do pi measurements. I'm going to leave this one up. Pi measurements dot values, right? And so now if we look at this, you can see you have a list of lists. Okay, so that's how you can go back and forth between dictionary and lists and do some cool Python.